Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well today. This time we are going to be talking about Final Fantasy IV. This is one of my favorite Final Fantasy games, and it's just a really fun game to play. I've got a lot of really great memories playing it, and yeah, let's just go ahead and get into it. Now, the first time I played Final Fantasy IV, it was on an emulator back in the mid 90s. I did not own a Super Nintendo growing up, and most of my friends in my neighborhood all had a Sega Genesis. So that just wasn't going to work out. The only way I was really going to be able to play this is if I downloaded an emulator and played it that way. I'm pretty sure I knew back then that this was the fourth game, or it must have been either from some friends telling me or probably the file download when I went to look for the ROMs online. I know I played this before I played Final Fantasy II and III, but I must have known that this was the fourth one at that time. I can't really remember exactly how I found out, but I'm pretty sure I knew before I started playing it. I think the part that I like most about the opening scene is how you're not really playing a good guy. Your hero, for lack of better words at the moment, he's sort of being kind of a crappy person. He's regretful of it, he doesn't really want to keep doing it, but yeah, you're not the good guy right away. I mean, heck, your class isn't even, anything like heroic. You're playing as a Dark Knight. And you do a lot of kind of crappy things, like killing people, stealing the crystals, and burning down the Village of Mist. Or at least setting off a bunch of bombs in the Village of Mist. It probably should have had the village, destroyed in some way, because I think when you go back to it, if I'm remembering the playthrough correctly, the village is fine. I mean, the only thing that's different is, it got blocked off, but that's because of Ryda's earthquake that she kind of laid out. But you do eventually work your way into being the hero, and you take on an evil empire that's being controlled by another person. You'll see a lot of this stuff getting repeated and honestly done better in some of the later Final Fantasies. Final Fantasy IV seems like it was setting up a lot of stuff for basically future games, or at least starting some ideas rolling that would eventually get expanded on in future games. Something else that I liked is how you slowly get introduced to your party members. It feels a lot more like a Dragon Quest game or Phantasy Star in that way, where you don't start out with a set party. You have to go and find a bunch of different people, or they kind of find you in some cases. It's a really refreshing way to kind of go about doing Final Fantasy. So let's talk a little bit about the story and the monsters, and just some other gameplay parts of this game. There's a really great story being told here. There's a lot of twists and turns in it. There are some characters that I think are incredibly useless, and others that are really kind of awesome. So the overall story is you are the Dark Knight Cecil, or Cecil, however way you want to pronounce it. And you go on this quest after you basically get betrayed by your king, and you are trying to save the four crystals. So it's kind of a return to that. It's fine. I mean, it's pretty familiar with Final Fantasy and everything. They use the crystals a lot. And I like that part. It's pretty kind of cool. Well, it's kind of cool that they did some different stuff with it. Sorry about flubbing that line, but whatever. And it's just fun the way that they have that going on. And then they sort of take it a step further by saying, well, there's not just four, there are 8 crystals, and you have to go underground to get the other 4. I will say this about Final Fantasy IV's story. Stuff just kinda happens. It's weird how stuff just sort of happens in the game. You can definitely tell that they are planning things out. They've got stuff set in motion. You have character arcs and everything. And some of those character arcs are done well, and some of them just sort of, they sort of take place. It's weird. I would have thought there would have been more. There would have been more with Cain going on in this. You get a little bit of it where he's sort of regretful for being mind controlled all the different times that he is in this, and he does let you in on a little bit of kind of how he likes Rosa, and there's sort of a start of a love triangle that doesn't really materialize or go anywhere between your main character, Cain, and Rosa. It's just sort of like, well, okay, you gave up on that, but okay, fair enough. But most of the game goes through just trying to get the different crystals and trying to save them as best you can. And you meet all of your different characters along the way. And you don't, at least in my opinion, you don't really have enough time to get to know a lot of these people. At least that's just my opinion. You meet some characters that are really great, like Yang and Sid. And then you meet characters that I did not like at all. Like Edward, I don't like bards, at least as a playable cast. I'm sorry to all those people out there who like bards. I don't like them. I think you could probably just leave them off and everything would be fine. But whatever. I thought Edward was just kind of annoying the entire time. He even gets called out for it by Rita, where she tells him he's a coward, and she's right. She's gone through way more crap than Edward did, but, whatever. I really hope I'm calling him right by saying Edward and not Edgar. Maybe I'll wait for a second to see if that comes up, and then I'll just kind of feel bad about it. Oh well. Either way, I don't like the guy. I think he's just a jerk. He gives Tella something to do, but for the most part, I just don't like the character at all. One thing I do remember about playing this, oh, it was Edward. Thanks. I'm not totally screwing this up. Anyway, one thing I do remember about playing this was just how you shouldn't get super attached to any of your characters in this, because the game will just, at least it felt like when I was playing through it, it felt like the game's just killing people off left and right. Like, it gave zero fucks about, what you wanted or the people that you enjoyed. It was just getting rid of people, and it did not give a damn. You do eventually find out that they're all okay, but that comes later on, and it's sort of like, oh, by the way, none of these people actually died, they're all perfectly fine, which felt a little weird to me. Another thing in the story that was really awesome is when you get to the Tower of Babel, and then you have the Giant of Babel. I really felt like the Giant of Babel was just a precursor or some idea that they were planning with the weapons in Final Fantasy VII. It feels that, well, it feels a little bit like that. Instead of the Giant of Babel being like a guardian of Earth or something like that, the Giant of Babel is here to destroy everything. That it felt more like it was an artificial creation as opposed to something that was designed to really defend the planet. Either way, it feels a lot of the same, and I really liked it. It was kind of cool. Gives you something to do. You go inside of it, destroy its little, control center, and then the giant blows up. So hey, it's pretty awesome. I just really like that part. I don't know why, but I just really enjoyed it. The part of the story that I felt just kind of went totally off the rails was when you go to the moon. You get inside a giant whale spaceship and you fly to the moon and you do stuff there. I don't understand that part, like why it was included. It doesn't feel like you really needed that. It just adds like a layer of, at least in my opinion, a layer of stupid to the game that did not really need it. You could have probably cut that part out and kept in some of the other parts that I didn't really like either. But yeah, like there was some stuff that they could have just left on the cutting room floor, and I think the game would have been perfectly fine with it. I'll talk a little bit more about this at the end when I talk about the ending of the game, which weird, it seems a bit redundant for me to say that, but whatever. I did not like the way that they handled Cecil and Goblez, their relationship. I feel like they just sort of tossed it out there and were like, yeah, this happened. Good luck figuring out why, but here you go. This was a thing that went on. Yeah, it's just very strange. So at the end of the game, you go back to the moon. You go there, you pick up Fusoya, you bring him back, basically like free Goblez of his mind control, and then those two go back to fight Zemus, the big bad guy, sort of like the hidden bad guy, who is kind of your dad, if I'm remembering it properly. Things got really stupid at the end of this game, and I was just sort of like, I don't understand why you're just tossing this in here, but it's part of this game where stuff just kind of happens. Anyway, you find out that Goblez is your brother. And that's it. Like, you don't fight him. Like, you don't really fight him, but you kind of do, but it doesn't matter that much. You find out that he's your brother, and it just sort of moves on from that point. You go back up to the moon, and Fusoya and Goblez defeat Zemus without you doing anything, which kind of feels like, well, maybe we should have done that, but I guess they're gonna do it for us. They do, and then Zemus becomes the main bad guy. Which just, again, fair enough, but I would have thought that this would have been a boss fight where you fight the big bad, you find out there's something behind the big bad, and then you fight two forms of the big bad. And the game doesn't really do that. It's just sort of like, well, okay, these two other characters defeat the bad guy. The bad guy then turns into this big nasty thing. You defeat the big nasty thing. And then your brother, who you had just met and haven't had a chance to reconcile with, he just sort of wanders off with the other dude who's a Lunarian, so the guy from the moon, because you're part of a race that came from the moon to Earth, which just makes things way more convoluted and stupid than it really has to. And then you go back to Earth, where you become the King of Baron, the country that you were fighting for at the very beginning, because that king's dead. And yeah, there's other weird stuff that just gets dropped in this game. But, you know, whatever. That's just the ending that I didn't like, where it feels like they started writing this, well, they wrote the story and then realized they didn't have enough space in the game, so they were like, shit, we need to just wrap this up really quick. And they kind of did, as fast as they could, and it just sort of feels like stuff happens at the end, and then the game just stops. At least that's how it felt to me. I'm realizing that probably sounded pretty negative because it sounds like I don't like the game. I really do enjoy this game, and I like it a lot. It's just got a lot of problems at the end that I'm playing it now, and I'm just like, really? Why didn't they do anything with all of these other plot points? Like, why did they just give up on stuff? Like, you don't get a real conclusion on these things. You get that little scene there at the very end with Goblez and Cecil where they're like, "You called me bro. Awesome. I'm gonna stay here with this old dude now. Great. Going back to Earth. Yay!" Ugh. I just don't like that ending very much. The build-up to it is kind of cool. Like, the overall story is great up until that last little part. The build-up to you fighting the big boss is awesome as well, because you kind of get all of the different characters that you've used over the time. Well, that's not really a great way to say it, but all the other characters who've been in your party over time come back and kind of pray for you and everything, and that brings your characters back to life. And then you get to beat the crap out of the end boss. So that's kind of cool. And it's a really cool fight at the end. At least by Super Nintendo standards. It's a really cool fight. It lasts a while, and you do kind of get some monotony in it, but it's a lot of fun playing this. So even though the game has some flaws, and there's some stuff in it that I don't like, I will say the graphics are great, the music is great. I think probably like 90% of the story is really good. It's a lot of fun to play this. It did feel a little weird at times, just because I wasn't sure about some things, but overall, this is a really great game. Sometimes I play a game like this, and I'm just sort of worried that, like, my nostalgic memories are gonna kind of cloud my judgment. Like, maybe the game I played wasn't as good as I remember, or something like that. And that's not really the case here. While I didn't like the ending as much, it's still a lot of fun to play stuff like this. Anyway, guys, that's going to wrap it up. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please let me know what you think in the comments below, and have a great day, everybody.